The cannon smoke clears across a blood-soaked battlefield. Bodies in blue and gray uniforms lie scattered like broken dolls. But among the fallen are names that would echo through history, men whose deaths were as legendary as their lives. Some fell to enemy bullets, others to friendly fire, and a few to circumstances so bizarre they defy belief. What if everything you thought you knew about how these Civil War legends died was wrong? What if the textbooks got it backwards? What if the real stories were buried beneath decades of myth and propaganda? These 9 generals didn't just die. They were claimed by fate, folly, and forces beyond their control. Their final moments reveal truths about war, leadership, and mortality that no monument can capture. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Number 1. Stonewall Jackson, the man who couldn't die. May 2nd, 1863. Chancellorsville. The Confederate 18th North Carolina Infantry peers through the darkness, fingers tight on triggers. Hoofbeats approach. 3 riders emerge from the shadows. "Halt! Who goes there?" No answer. The riders keep coming. "Fire!" 3 muzzle flashes light up the night. Thomas Stonewall Jackson tumbles from his horse, 3 Confederate bullets in his body. His own men have just shot the South's most feared general, but Jackson refuses to die. The man who earned his nickname Stonewall at First Bull Run by standing firm against overwhelming odds now faces his greatest battle, against death itself. Dr. Hunter Holmes McGuire, Jackson's personal physician, performs the amputation at Wilderness Tavern using primitive Civil War medical techniques. No anesthesia exists except whiskey and opium. The bone saw, a crude instrument with teeth like a carpenter's tool, requires 45 minutes of continuous cutting through the humerus bone, just 2 inches below Jackson's shoulder joint. Jackson remains conscious throughout the procedure, biting down on a leather strap as McGuire saws through bone, muscle, and sinew. The general's aide, James Power Smith, holds him down as the surgeon works. Blood loss is massive, approximately 2 pints during the operation alone. In 1863, there are no blood transfusions, no IV fluids, no understanding of shock treatment. The amputation site is dressed with cotton bandages that have been stored in unsanitary conditions. Civil War surgeons don't understand germ theory. They use the same instruments on multiple patients without sterilization, never washing their hands between operations. Within 48 hours, red streaks radiate from Jackson's wound, indicating blood poisoning has set in. For 8 days, Jackson fights for his life in a small outbuilding at Guinea Station, Virginia. Pneumonia develops, a common killer when the body's defenses are weakened by trauma and blood loss. His temperature spikes to 104 degrees Fahrenheit as his lungs fill with fluid. Delirium follows. He calls out military commands, reliving battles in his fevered mind. On May 10, 1863, Jackson's breathing becomes labored and irregular. His pulse weakens to barely detectable. In his final moments of clarity, he speaks his last words: "Let us cross over the river and rest under the shade of the trees." Robert E. Lee receives the news at his headquarters near Chancellorsville. The commanding general, known for his emotional control, breaks down and weeps. "I have lost my right arm," he tells his staff. The friendly fire incident has cost the Confederacy its most aggressive and successful general, the man who could march his troops 25 miles in a day and strike where the enemy least expected. Comment "friendly fire" if you understand that in war, your greatest enemy might be wearing the same uniform. Jackson took 8 days to die from 3 bullets. The next general would be killed by a single shot from a nobody, and it would happen in broad daylight. Number 2. J.E.B. Stuart. Death of a Showman. Private John Huff is nobody special. just another Union trooper in the 5th Michigan Cavalry, dismounted and fighting on foot at Yellow Tavern. He's 19 years old, scared, and has never killed anyone important. Then he sees him, the Confederate general with the plumed hat and golden spurs, rallying his cavalry just 40 yards away. James Ewell Brown J.E.B. Stuart, the man who rode circles around Union armies, who humiliated their commanders with daring raids that penetrated deep into enemy territory. At 31 years old, Stuart embodies the romantic ideal of the Southern Cavalier. His uniform is immaculate even in battle, gray jacket with gold braiding, yellow sash, plumed hat, and golden spurs that jingle as he rides. He carries a saber with an ornate hilt and rides a magnificent bay horse named Virginia. But today, romance meets mathematics. Stuart's 4,500 cavalry face 12,000 Union troopers. Under Philip Sheridan, Huff raises his .44 caliber Navy Colt revolver, a weapon that fires a 140-grain round ball at approximately 800 feet per second. The range is close, maybe 40 yards. Huff has never killed anyone important, never even fired at an officer. His hands shake as he aims. One shot. The bullet tears through Stuart's abdomen, fragmenting his liver and lodging near his spine. The .44 caliber round creates a devastating wound channel, destroying vital organs that no Civil War surgeon can repair. Stuart knows immediately he's dying. The pain is excruciating, a burning, tearing sensation as internal bleeding begins. His men lift him from his horse and place him in an ambulance for the 12-mile journey to Richmond. The rough roads make every bump a torture, sending waves of agony through his shattered abdomen. Blood pools in Stuart's peritoneal cavity, creating pressure that makes breathing increasingly difficult. His pulse weakens from a normal 72 beats per minute to over 120 as his body fights to compensate for blood loss. His skin grows pale and clammy, classic signs of hemorrhagic shock. For 24 hours, Stuart lingers in agony at the home of his brother-in-law, Dr. Charles Brewer, on Grace Street in Richmond. He asks repeatedly for his wife Flora and their children, but they're at his father-in-law's plantation in Beaver Dam, Virginia, too far away to reach him in time. His staff sends telegrams, but the family won't arrive before the end. Stuart's final hours are marked by periods of consciousness interrupted by waves of pain. He dictates his final military report, detailing the cavalry's movements and recommending promotions for his officers. His last words to his aide, Major Andrew Venable, are spoken in a whisper: "I am resigned. God's will be done." He dies at 7:38 p.m. on May 12, 1864. The South's greatest cavalry commander, the man who once captured a Union general in his own headquarters, who rode completely around McClellan's army twice, brought down by a frightened teenager with a pistol. But at least Stuart saw his killer. The next general would never know what hit him. Number 3. Albert Sidney Johnston, the silent killer. Nobody notices the blood. At Shiloh, Tennessee, on April 6, 1862, Confederate General Albert Sidney Johnston leads 40,000 men in a surprise attack against Ulysses S. Grant's unprepared army. At 59, Johnston is the Confederacy's highest-ranking field commander, a man Jefferson Davis considers irreplaceable. The morning assault catches Union forces completely off guard, driving them back toward the Tennessee River in panic. Johnston rides his bay horse Fire Eater among his troops near a peach orchard in full bloom, the pink petals falling like snow around the advancing Confederates. Around 2:30 p.m., he directs the assault on the Union left flank when a stray bullet, possibly from a Union sharpshooter in the hornet's nest, possibly from Confederate crossfire, strikes his right leg just behind the knee. The wound looks minor, a small hole in his uniform, barely bleeding. Johnston examines it briefly, then continues commanding. "This is nothing," he tells his staff. The battle is going well. Union forces are retreating on all fronts. Victory seems within reach. His boot fills with blood. Still, nobody notices. The bullet, a .58 caliber mini A ball weighing 500 grains, has severed Johnston's popliteal artery, the major blood vessel behind the knee that carries approximately 20% of the leg's blood supply. The artery, only 8 millimeters in diameter, normally pumps blood at 120 millimeters of mercury pressure. When severed, it can drain a man's entire blood volume in 15 to 20 minutes. Johnston's uniform is dark blue, the regulation Confederate general's coat that looks almost black in the afternoon light. The spreading bloodstain is invisible against the dark fabric. His high leather cavalry boots, reaching nearly to his knees, contain the hemorrhaging like a bucket, creating the illusion that the wound is superficial. With each heartbeat, 70 to 80 milliliters of blood pump into Johnston's boot, nearly 5 liters per minute at peak. Flow. The general grows progressively paler and weaker, but in the chaos of battle, his staff attributes his condition to exhaustion and the stress of command. Dr. D.W. Yandell, Johnston's personal physician, is 200 yards away treating other wounded soldiers. A simple tourniquet, a rope or belt tied tightly around the thigh, could have saved the general's life by stopping the arterial bleeding. But Johnston waves off medical attention, insisting that other men need help more urgently. For 15 minutes, Johnston bleeds to death in plain sight of his entire staff. When he finally slides from his saddle and collapses in a small ravine near the peach orchard, his boot overflows with blood, nearly 3 pints of his life's essence pooled in leather. Jefferson Davis later writes in his memoirs, "When Sidney Johnston fell, it was the turning point of our fate, for we had no other hand to take up his work in the West. The Confederacy's highest-ranking general killed by a wound so small he ignored it, and so hidden that nobody else noticed until it was too late." Comment turning point if you realize that sometimes the smallest wounds carry the greatest consequences. 3 generals down, and we haven't even reached the strangest death yet. Wait until you hear about the bishop who traded his Bible for a sword. Number 4. Leonidas Polk. Target practice. But here's the problem nobody talks about. Some Civil War generals weren't just soldiers. They were men of God turned warriors, and their deaths revealed the brutal contradiction between faith and warfare. William T. Sherman peers through his telescope at Pine Mountain, Georgia. 3 Confederate generals stand exposed on the ridge, studying Union positions through field glasses. Sherman recognizes one of them, the tall figure in the center. "That's a good place for artillery practice," Sherman tells his gunners. The target is Lieutenant General Leonidas Polk, the Fighting Bishop, an Episcopal clergyman who chose war over peace when the South seceded. The first shells miss. The second salvo finds its mark. The 10-pound Parrott shell traveling at 1,200 feet per second doesn't just kill Polk, it nearly cuts him in half. He dies instantly, his blood spattering the other 2 generals. That evening, Sherman writes in his battle report, "We killed Bishop Polk yesterday and made good progress today." For Sherman, Polk was just another target. For the Confederacy, they'd lost both a general and a spiritual leader. The age of chivalrous warfare was ending, one artillery shell at a time, but the next death would bring chivalry roaring back in the most famous battle of the war. Number 5. John F. Reynolds, first to fall. "Forward, men, forward for God's country!" Major General John F. Reynolds waves his sword, urging the Iron Brigade forward at Gettysburg. It's 10:15 a.m. on July 1st, 1863. The battle that will decide the war is just beginning. Reynolds turns in his saddle to encourage his men. A Confederate sharpshooter 200 yards away squeezes his trigger. The .58 caliber Minié ball enters behind Reynolds' right ear and exits through his left temple. He falls from his horse without a sound, dead before hitting the ground. The highest-ranking officer killed at Gettysburg dies in the first hour of fighting. His aide catches the general's lifeless body as it slides from the saddle. Reynolds might have commanded the entire Army of the Potomac if he'd accepted Lincoln's offer. Instead, he dies defending a small Pennsylvania town most Americans had never heard of. His death helps determine where the battle will be fought and where the Confederacy's last invasion will be stopped. One bullet, one death, one moment that changed history, but the next general would face something far worse than a quick death. He'd have time to see it coming. Number 6. Patrick Cleburne, The Charge of the Doomed, November 30th, 1864, Franklin, Tennessee. Patrick Cleburne knows he's about to die. The Irish-born general stares across 2 miles of open ground at the Union breastworks. Artillery and repeating rifles bristle from the earthworks. It's suicide, and Cleburne knows it. This attack is madness, he tells his staff. But orders are orders. Cleburne mounts his horse Dixie and draws his sword. "Follow me, boys." The charge begins. Thousands of Confederate soldiers pour across the open field into a storm of lead and iron. Cleburne rides at the front, sword raised high. Multiple bullets strike him simultaneously, one through the heart, another through the head. He dies 40 yards from the Union lines, closer than any other Confederate general. His sword is still gripped in his right hand when they find him. 6 Confederate generals die at Franklin. Cleburne's division is destroyed. His fiancée, Susan Tarleton, receives the news by telegram. They were to be married after the war. Comment, "Never retreat," if you understand that courage and foolishness often wear the same uniform. Cleburne died like a warrior, leading from the front. The next general would die like a fool, thrown from a horse in a peacetime accident. Number 7. Michael Corcoran, The Simplest Death. December 22, 1863, Fairfax, Virginia. It's just a friendly gesture between Irish-American generals. Michael Corcoran borrows Thomas Francis Megher's horse for an afternoon ride. What could go wrong? Everything. The horse spooks at the sound of artillery practice. It bolts. Corcoran, who survived 13 months in Confederate prisons, who lived through the hell of Bull Run, is thrown violently to the ground. His head strikes a rock. Skull fracture, massive brain hemorrhage. 4 hours later, he's dead. The irony is crushing. Corcoran endured starvation, disease, and psychological torture in Confederate captivity. He survived battles that killed thousands. But a simple riding accident, the kind that could happen to anyone, claims one of the Union's most colorful generals. 100,000 mourners attend his funeral in New York City. The Irish-American community has lost its greatest symbol of patriotism and heroism. Sometimes the most mundane deaths are the most tragic. But the next general's death would be anything but mundane. It would be cold-blooded murder. Number 8. Earl Van Dorn, The Knock at the Door, May 7, 1863, Spring Hill, Tennessee. Earl Van Dorn sits at his desk, reviewing cavalry reports. The 43-year-old Confederate general has rebuilt his reputation after early disasters. His raids have been brilliant. A knock at the door. Dr. George Peters enters quietly. Van Dorn looks up, expecting a medical consultation. Peters is a local physician and state legislator. Instead, Peters draws a .36 caliber Navy Colt. 2 shots to the head at point-blank range. Van Dorn dies instantly, blood and brain matter spattering his military dispatches. Peters' motive? He believes Van Dorn has been sleeping with his young wife, Jessie. Whether the affair actually happened doesn't matter. Peters' jealousy is real enough to drive him to murder. The assassination shocks the Confederacy. Van Dorn wasn't killed by Union bullets. He was murdered by a cuckolded husband in his own headquarters. Peters is arrested but never tried. Local sentiment supports him. Many believe Van Dorn got what he deserved. Military rank couldn't protect a man from personal enemies or small-town justice. But the final death would be the most shocking of all, because it would happen between allies. Number 9. Jefferson C. Davis. When Generals Killed Generals. September 29, 1862. Louisville, Kentucky. The Galt House Hotel lobby. The slap echoes through the room. Union Major General William Bull Nelson, 300 pounds of arrogance and rage, has just humiliated Brigadier General Jefferson C. Davis in front of fellow officers and civilians. Called him a coward. Slapped him like a child. Davis demands satisfaction. Nelson refuses a duel, dismissing the smaller man with contempt. But Davis won't be dismissed. He borrows a pistol from a friend. Confronts Nelson again. General Nelson, I demand the satisfaction due a gentleman. Nelson slaps him again. Davis draws the borrowed .36 caliber Navy Colt and fires once into Nelson's chest. The bullet pierces the massive general's heart. Nelson collapses, dying within minutes. Davis calmly hands the smoking pistol back to its owner and walks away. The murder creates a scandal that reaches Lincoln's cabinet. Davis has killed a fellow Union general in cold blood in front of witnesses in a public hotel. But Davis has political connections. Nelson was widely hated for his brutality. Davis is briefly arrested, then quietly transferred to another command. He's never court-martialed, never faces justice. He continues serving throughout the war, eventually commanding a corps under Sherman. The Union Army's dirty secret. Sometimes personal feuds mattered more than fighting the Confederacy. If you believe that, learning the real stories of history, not the sanitized versions, makes you wiser than those who accept comfortable myths. Hit the like button. These 9 legends died as they lived, violently, dramatically, and often ironically. Their deaths reveal truths about the Civil War that monuments and textbooks prefer to ignore. War doesn't just kill soldiers, it exposes the full spectrum of human nature, from heroism to jealousy, from sacrifice to murder. Jackson died from friendly fire, Stuart from a nobody's lucky shot, Johnston from a wound he ignored, Polk from artillery practice, Reynolds from a sniper's bullet, Cleburne from a hopeless charge, Corcoran from a horse accident, Van Dorn from a jealous husband, Davis from another general's rage. 9 different deaths, 9 different lessons about the randomness of mortality in wartime. If you want to understand how the frontier shaped American character through violence and survival, watch our video on how cowboys survived deadly heat on the cattle drives. And if you're fascinated by the brutal realities of 19th century warfare, check out 7 Forgotten Tools buffalo hunters used on the Great Plains. If you believe that understanding the brutal truths of history makes you stronger than those who prefer comfortable lies, subscribe to Wild America. Only those who can't handle reality stay out. The legends are dead, but their stories live on, not in marble monuments or sanitized textbooks, but in the brutal, honest truth of how they really died. Because in the end, death is the great equalizer. It comes for generals and privates alike, respecting neither rank nor reputation. These 9 deaths changed the course of American history. Jackson's loss at Chancellorsville robbed Lee of his most aggressive commander. Stuart's death blinded Confederate cavalry operations. Johnston's bleeding out at Shiloh shifted momentum in the Western theater. Each death created ripple effects that altered the war's trajectory in ways that still echo through American history today. The Civil War's outcome hung on such moments, when individual deaths shifted the balance of power between North and South. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. See you again next time for more brutal, untold American frontier survival adventure stories.